What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Fourth and Frames, the fantasy football podcast, the flagship fantasy football podcast here at fantasyandframes.com. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards, and we are back from the Fantasy Football Expo. It took us a week to get our bearings straight, but we are back this week, and we're getting ready to do a special 2-hour episode talking about the NFC and AFC North. We didn't get to the NFC North last week, so we're just going to combine them all today. And, we're at the Expo, and we were talking about the AFC North. We were in, Browns country. And ran into a friend there that I met back in 2019 at the very first Fantasy Football Expo. Back then it was called the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo. He is a huge Browns fan, and I thought to myself, look, he writes for DLF. He's a great fantasy football mind, great friend. Got to have him on the show. So we are going to be joined today by Mr. Josh Brickner of DLF. Josh, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Jorge. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to come on Fantasy and Frames here, and excited to talk some AFC North. And yes, it's going to be an interesting Browns season, as it is every year. So that's about all I can say. But yeah, that's what Jorge and I we are OGs of the Fantasy Football Expo. So not many people can say they're at the first one. So
yeah, this is true. In fact, we had Josh come on a week after that expo to talk about the AFC North also. And Nate, you'll appreciate this because remember last season you would give us offensive lineman reports?
Yes, that highlight of my career.
Exactly. Well, during that episode where Josh is on there, we were talking about the Browns' offensive line like nobody's business. Like Joe Bitonio came up in conversation at least like 20 times that episode, rightfully so, because it was the year that I think Baker Mayfield took over and Nick Chubb was the rookie running back that year. So obviously that offensive line played some relative importance, but enough about that. We'll get into that in a little bit. As I just mentioned, Nate Markham, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Good. That wasn't your way of saying I'm in charge of offensive line talk for the next 18 weeks, is it?
For those who did not see the video of me winking just there, just putting it out there.
Seductively.
Yeah, seductively. Tyler Heil, host of the Dynasty 365 show that we just finished recording and live streaming. If you haven't, subscribe there. Go rate, review, and subscribe over on iTunes or wherever it is you listen to podcasts. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I am ready to get some self-loathing Browns fan in because that's just kind of what we all are. I don't know about
yeah. I'm here with you. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot that we have two of you on the show now. This is fantastic. Two loathing Browns fans. This is going to be a good conversation.
Oh, yeah, man. Never stop being a factory of sadness.
It is. The factory is at peak efficiency right now as well. I'm sure we'll get into later. So
we will get into it, I promise you. Before we get into that, let's get into some news and notes. And Tyler, actually, why don't you take us through some of the news and notes for today's show that we just we didn't get a chance to get into in Dynasty 365 last hour.
All right. So not a whole lot of super groundbreaking news, but Baker Mayfield was named the starter in Carolina. I'd say that is probably pretty good for their weapons. Not great. It's better than Sam Darnold, though. The next one is Dobbins has been taken off the PUP. I don't know how much he's necessarily going to play in week 1, but Gus Edwards has been put on the active PUP, which means he's going to miss at least the first 4 games. That recovery does not sound like it's going well. So do any of you guys have a different opinion that Gus Edwards is probably going to miss the first half of the season, if not more?
It's looking that way.
Yeah, it is. And if Dobbins was healthy, I mean, this would be his backfield, but he hasn't been in team drills. I'm sure we'll get into it, but I'm a little suspicious about Dobbins. And as a Buckeye, I'm a big Dobbins fan, but I'm a little cautious this year. But yeah.
How does it feel, Josh, to have that dichotomy where you have like one team, a perennial winner year in and year out, and the other team has had its moments, but for the most part has not. And you're balancing that fandom. Like it's literally like yin and yang that you're dealing with every single day as a dual fan of the of the Buckeyes and the Browns. How do you deal with that every day?
It's tough because the Buckeyes make me mostly happy, but the expectations are so huge. I mean, it's national title or bust with Ohio State. That's just the way it's been for the last, 6-7 years. And I always say that for rivalries go, I understand I'm on the front end and the back end of the two big rivalries, because obviously Ohio State, absent this last year, has owned Michigan. I mean, we've owned them, but the Steelers have owned the Browns. So it's the best and the worst of times sometimes. So
okay,
that's a good way to put it.
No, that's honest. Tyler. Are you a Buckeyes fan also, or no?
No.
He's like, I'm not getting into that. That's not happening.
Are you a fan of that team up north, Tyler? Gotta ask.
No, I'm not. I got
Michigan, for those who know what he's talking about.
Got Gamecocks. So, just pretty much anything but Ohio State.
That is my brother-in-law. He is a proud Ohio University alum and hates the Buckeyes as well. So
yes,
I don't know. That's something about OU alums. You guys just hate Ohio State for some reason.
Yeah, we have a little brother complex.
Well, that is true. I mean, you are. So
yeah, exactly. We're here first. Dang it.
That is true. Hey, that's fair.
So if we're sticking with Ravens news, also does Isaiah Likely or Tyler Huntley interest you guys? Just the duo of the preseason.
Not
just preseason. Tyler Huntley was great down the stretch last year for Lamar Jackson. I'm sorry, I cut you off, Nate. What were you going to say?
No, I just say, I mean, Tyler Huntley, if I'm not mistaken, I think is in the last year of his contract, and he would love to get an opportunity to go somewhere else. But if I'm Baltimore, I'm not letting Huntley go anywhere, because it's exactly what you were saying, Jorge. He filled in admirably. He's been great in the preseason too. He's 13-14 for $129 and a touchdown. And as far as Isaiah Likely goes, the question with that is, what are the other weapons? Do we expect them? Is J.K. Dobbins' injury and the lack thereof of Mike Davis and Tyler Batty going to really create more of a pass-heavy approach? And if that's the case, I mean, it's got to go Andrews, Bateman, pick your choice, probably Andrews, Bateman. And then Likely at least has been targeted. I mean, we know this. I don't think it's another receiver that's going to step up. I mean, if you're going to have 3 targets or 3 mouths to feed, maybe Likely could be the third. But it's not, likely. Said that, I'm guessing.
I love
well
the
done.
It is possible. I mean, if he gets that slot work, he could get some. I mean, if you want to target him late in your draft, great. But sometimes we fall in love with these preseason darlings way too much. So
tight end premium league, super
yes,
deep, maybe.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so a couple more things. Kenyon Drake was released. I don't necessarily think this is very consequential. It might mean a slight uptick for Josh Jacobs' receiving work, but overall, he was not going to have a big role in that offense and never was, whether he was healthy or not.
Wait a second. John Gruden told me that Josh Jacobs can't catch the ball. Are you saying that was a mistake on the Gruden leadership back then?
No, I would never question the Gruden leadership.
Yeah, it's going to be funny to see what an actual competent coach in modern football can do with Josh Jacobs this year.
Yes, that'll be fun. I think Zamir White's going to play a big role in that offense too, but it's not going to tank the Josh Jacobs value as much as fantasy Twitter seems to think, I believe. Isaiah Pacheco is a thing, apparently. I still kind of lean toward the Darwin Thompson level, but are you guys big believers in Isaiah Pacheco?
I mean, so of all the reports out of camp that I hear here, I think that the national media is taking it and running with it a little bit more so than what they feel in camp. But it's been weird. He hasn't gotten a ton of touches as a whole. Now, granted, that's maybe because it's limited number of games, but Ronald Jones probably won't make the 53. I think that's already there's 75% certainty within the media that he's out, which is one less person he has to leapfrog to get significant touches. I think it's going to be a mess in the backfield. Andy Reid's probably going to divvy it up decent, but a hot hand. And if there's one that has it, it's probably Pacheco.
All right. So the Chiefs are only going to carry 3 running backs.
As of right now, let's see. Who am I missing?
Is McKinnon still, or is he
McKinnon?
not?
Yeah,
McKinnon. Yeah, and then there's Derek Gore, who
Gore
they
Gore
is
right.
control over. So he'd be the fourth guy. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, so
Are you saying something, Josh?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say just with Pacheco, I feel like he has that talent. He has some nuances. Obviously, he had that Trent Richardson moment where Patrick Mahomes thought he had a touchdown and he, missed a wide open cut lane to the end zone. But I mean, that's kind of what the rookie. I just think he's a good flyer to take, but you can't expect much for the first, I'd say, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. He might be someone that could win you leagues, playoff time, come crunch time, but you can't expect much early season, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess I kind of buried the lead on the news, but it's been over a week since Deshaun's official 11-game suspension came down. We covered most of the Deshaun situation 2 weeks ago in here. I'm not interested in going back over that. He's out 11 games. Jacoby Brissett is most likely playing the first 11 games. That offense is going to struggle a little bit, but that offense wasn't terrible with a bottom of the barrel Baker Mayfield injured last year. So I think Kevin Stefanski and that offensive staff can still kind of put something together and have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt be successful over the first few months of the season. I just wanted to throw this on here because it confirms my priors that Nick Westbrook-Akina, however you pronounce it, is the wide receiver 2 in Tennessee. So take that, Treylon Burks stands.
Boy, there you go.
Josh, so when we had the NFL draft, we did our NFL draft coverage we do every year. We were live streaming the first round of the draft. And Tyler's not even like a fan of the Titans. And the second that the trade was made to Philadelphia for A.J. Brown, we had an actual Titans fan on the stream, and he was not even close to as mad as what Tyler was, who had no investment in this team whatsoever. So needless to say, he is not a fan of Treylon Burks too much.
Yes. I wish him the best.
There's a lot of talent there. It feels like Vrabel's going old school on him, so they're trying to break him down. I feel like there's too much talent, raw talent there, just for him to just sit on the, be the wide receiver 3, 4 all. That's just my opinion, but maybe I'm too big of a dynasty guy. It's hard to say. But
and last but not least, a little bit of IDP here. Derwin James got himself the proverbial bag. Got, what was it, a 4-year, $75 million contract, $76 million contract.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for a safety.
We're seeing that switch. Safeties are getting paid now because they're asked to play 4 different positions now. They're not just staying deep. Now they're playing 60% in the box, 15% in the slot coverage. They're asked to do more roles. They're playing a lot of heavy, big nickel formations where their involvement is more paramount to the overall defensive scheme. And I think they're asking to get paid in return for that.
Yes, I agree.
Now, Nate, for an IDP, as much as Derwin James got paid the big bag, are you willing to pay up the big bag in terms of cost for your draft to get Derwin James a defensive back for your fantasy football roster, for IDP roster?
Does he get it? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Or is he somebody that his ADP is just, well, I guess it's hard to say ADP, but like just perceived ADP. Is he too expensive at this point where you'd rather just take a gamble on somebody else and fill another IDP position like a linebacker or a defensive lineman?
I mean, tongue in cheek, I would want to know if Derwin James could use some of that money and put it around his shoulder and some other areas for support and cushion to prevent either further injury. But at the end of the day, Derwin James outscores next to TJ Watt the rest of the field by the largest gap in IDP, almost across every scoring platform. I mean, there's very little that, unless the league happens to benefit one specific odd scoring format, like a non-safety heavy where corners get bumped up, whatever the case may be. But in 2 less games, he only, in our scoring, he still outscored. He was still number 1 in only 15 games. So, yeah, am I reaching for him? Probably not, just because I have a tendency to wait on defensive back. But let's not talk. We'll do IDP another time. Josh doesn't listen to all this.
I enjoy learning about IDP slowly but surely. The only IDP league I'm in is the Fantasy and Frames charity league. That's the only IDP that I'm in right now.
It's a good
Except
one.
for my home league, we do one. Yeah, it's a great. Yeah, we do one IDP player. So I always just take a linebacker. gets a lot of tackles. So
Exactly.
Appreciate the shout out. And let's with that, let's get into some AFC North talk. All right, Josh. Let's start with quarterback position. I know in our rundown we have it to break it down team by team, but I like to mix it up and put everybody on the edge of their seat. So let's talk about some quarterbacks here. And we're not going to talk about Pickett, and we're not going to talk about Brissett because there's a lot of unknowns there.
Yeah,
well, there's one known, and then there's an unknown. But for your fantasy roster, let's talk about the two really big ones in the AFC North. Talking, of course, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. Lamar Jackson currently the quarterback 4 in ADP over at Fantasy Pros. Joe Burrow, the quarterback 6. And just to give you an idea here of the value of these players, going around Lamar Jackson overall in half PPR ADP, which is what we like to talk about here, going down to 49. He's going around the likes of Darren Waller, Elijah Mitchell, Cortland Sutton, A.J. Dillon, his teammate J.K. Dobbins. Josh, if you had to pick any of those players, would you pick any of those players over Lamar Jackson, or is Lamar Jackson in like your 10 or 12 team league somebody that you think is worth the investment despite the injury history of the past couple seasons?
No, I'm absolutely taking Cortland Sutton with Russell Wilson throwing in the ball, and then A.J. Dillon, who I think is going to have a huge year in Green Bay, over Lamar Jackson. Probably Elijah Mitchell, maybe. But where Lamar Jackson's going, that's too soon for me to take a quarterback, especially one, like you said. I think he's further away from that QB1 season. And, is he going to be more the QB 15 or the QB 9 that we had in 2020? I would say it's probably closer to QB 6, 7, 8, 9, and I think his price is too high at this point, in my opinion. But I'm taking A.J. Dillon and Cortland Sutton all day over him.
It's crazy. You just go like 10 draft spots later, and you get to Joe Burrow, and he's going around the likes of Brandon Cooks and Hollywood Brown and Antonio Gibson currently, Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson. That is more palatable, I feel, for me to take Joe Burrow around who he's going around. Fun fact, or interesting fact, I should say, going 2 spots ahead of him is Kyler Murray. Now, Nate, when you're talking about fantasy quarterbacks, I'm not talking about real like NFL quarterbacks. We're talking about fantasy football quarterbacks. Would you have expected that gap to be so narrow between those two guys, or do you think there's actually a lot of positive hype for Joe Burrow, given the weapons that he has in Cincinnati?
Oh, I think the hype is warranted to an extent. I mean, the biggest caveat last year to why I think that he didn't even finish a few spots higher was the fact that he had, I don't have it in front of me, I'm going to say a number, and I don't think it's far off, 53 sacks is how many times I think he was hit last year. And, that has to play a little bit into it. And this year, with Lel Collins and that offensive line a year healthier and a year more cohesive, I think there's a good opportunity for us to see that, QB 5, 6 season out of Joe Burrow. The thing with the passing quarterback that we've seen is, let's go back 2 years ago to Tom Brady's, amazing season that we all witnessed. And he still, despite all the accolades, was still the QB 6 on the season, QB 5. It's just without the leg upside, it's hard. And to kind of go even a little bit further, one of the things I shouldn't have to mention each time, but is it a 4 or 6 point passing league?
Right.
And that 100% dictates a lot of mine. Like in a 4-point league where you had Lamar for Josh, I still don't take Lamar, but I'm a little more trigger happy, just a little bit, because I like the idea of those rushing touchdowns. But Tyler pointed out, you don't have to be the fastest guy to also lead the league in rushing touchdowns. I mean, we've seen that from others before. It's just less likely, I guess.
Yeah.
Tyler, go ahead, Josh. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's great for the first 10 games of the season. Then you better have another quarterback ready to go. But no, absolutely, Nate's right. If it's 6 point, then Burrow is the guy you want. Brady's the guy you want. Those kind of quarterbacks, the more pocket passers. So I was going to say that's a fantastic point, Nate, that I didn't bring up.
Oh, thank you.
Let's go to the Browns and the Steelers quarterback situation. Right now, it's Jacoby Brissett, and what we're thinking is Mitch Trubisky. And for those who were listening to the other podcast or Dynasty 365 podcast an hour ago, the topic of is it going to be Pickett? Is it going to be Trubisky? And Nate, you brought up a good point in that, with a decimated. I shouldn't say decimated. With not a
say
good. Okay, with a decimated offensive line, it makes more sense to put Trubisky out there, who has a little bit more mobility, versus putting your first round pick in harm's way so early on in his career. But let's just call a spade a spade. Trubisky is not exactly a quarterback that's going to set the world on fire, and Jacoby Brissett. Yeah, you could say the exact same thing. But the issue with these two guys that they have is Brissett actually has a decent offensive line. Josh, would you say that the Browns' offensive line is still one of the better ones in the league, or have they taken a hit in recent years?
Absolutely. The real they have two of the best guards in the league in Teller and Joel Bitonio. Now, losing Nick Harris for the year is that's just a huge. We were actually all at the Expo when that happened, and I was like, oh crap.
Right.
Just the second play of the preseason, he's out. But I think they have I want to say Michael Dunn or Ethan. I can't think of the guy's name, but so I would say center is a concern, and Jedrick Wills. This is a make or break year for him, left tackle. But the Browns' offensive line is still very solid. So I think Brissett can. I wouldn't touch Brissett unless it's a super flex lead as my maybe fringe QB3. But I think that he can have some success. But I think the Browns' skill players are, I want to say it's maybe the top, like Chubb, Hunt, maybe Amari Cooper, David Njoku are in a little bit better situation than the Steelers. Some of the Steelers skill players are. Excuse me.
Right. That's exactly where I was going to go to next. Right. Is like if you had to pick, Brissett, being the quarterback for Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, versus Trubisky with Najee, Deontay, was looking like George Pickens next on the totem pole, and then Pat Freiermuth. Nate, do you agree with Josh there? Would you still take the skill players on the Brown side, or would you go lean towards Pittsburgh?
Yeah, when you break it down super deep, how I have each ranked side by side, I have Najee higher than I have Chubb, but I have Kareem Hunt higher than anybody else in Pittsburgh. I have Deontay higher than Amari Cooper. I have Freiermuth ahead of Njoku. So I don't know if that's the way I can phrase it, but I feel like the Browns are a more cohesive unit. Seems like they could flow better. Seems like if you just had to invest in who was most likely to stay water and not have huge variance, it would probably be Cleveland. But from piece to piece, I don't know. That's a toss up. Tyler, I'll let you go. Or Josh.
If I'm going, I'll just say if I'm picking a quarterback to start week 1, if I'm in a super flex league and I somehow put myself in a bad situation, I'm just going to pick up off waivers or take with my last pick in the draft whoever is named the Steelers starting quarterback. It is just a difference of philosophy. The Steelers are going to air it out. They wanted to air it out last year, but Big Ben wasn't really capable of doing it. So they kind of passed to run, and they did it that way. But I have a lot more faith that the Steelers will pass the crap out of the ball, and I have a lot more faith that the Browns will run the crap out of the ball.
Right. I just think with the Steelers now I agree, like talent-wise, all three, like Claypool, Pickens, Johnson, Harris, I feel like is in a good situation. I personally don't think he's more talented than Chubb, but he's younger. I just think that as far as like trying to pick out which one, Pickens has the most upside, but trying to pick out which one between those three pass catchers, even Freiermuth, who I like, but is there enough of that? Can you pick the right one that's going to have success? Where at the Browns, it's just Chubb, Hunt, Cooper, for wide receiver 3, fringe wide receiver 2. And then I love it. I love David Njoku. We can get into it here as a late round tight end who can easily return tight end 1 value.
May I phrase a question to you guys in Cleveland? Or not in Cleveland, but as fans. So Cleveland Beat Report there's a few guys that are rumoring that they believe the Browns could be addressing Jalen Reagor trade talks with the Eagles. I've seen that a couple different places. Doesn't mean it's valid sources. That could have been anybody. But Jalen Reagor comes to the Browns post Deshaun Watson. Is Reagor even someone that you would even imagine picking up off the waivers if he joins that team? Is it even, flick a little bit of the sensory?
No, Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Bell are already better than him.
I agree with that.
Right. I do. Now, I would say I like Bell a lot more. Peoples-Jones is a good deep threat. That's why I wouldn't even mess with Rager, because Peoples-Jones are deep threat. Peoples-Jones, he's terrible in the intermediate to short game. Once Watson comes back, I think Peoples-Jones is an intriguing option, but not until then, in my opinion. But yes, they're both ahead of Rager. Pass on Rager.
Yeah. And yes, if I'm the Browns, I would trade for Jalen Rager, because the Eagles are probably on the verge of cutting him, which means it's a 7th round draft pick for a wide receiver 4. Sure. Why not?
Depth. Why not?
He'd be better for real life football than fantasy football at that point. For the Browns than your fantasy team. Right.
Hey, they need a kick returner.
That's right. Yeah.
So I want to ask you a question, Josh, here, because Nate, we responded to a tweet over the weekend by Drew Davenport regarding Kareem Hunt. And I think was it Drew Davenport or was it Joe Dolan? I think both of them were involved in the tweet. But the idea of what to do with Kareem Hunt, and do you see? And it's funny that you mentioned Jalen Reagor and the Philadelphia Eagles. Has there been any news or talk about that particular scenario going down in terms of trade, or has there been another team in the waters in terms of trade partners for Kareem Hunt, or are they just going to keep Kareem Hunt this year and let him earn that contract?
Mary Kay Cabot came out today and said the Browns are not planning on trading Kareem Hunt, that he is likely to be with them for the remainder of the season. So I of course he was talking to the Eagles, and it makes a lot of sense. Miles Sanders is blah, Gainwell, Boston Scott. I mean, Kareem Hunt would walk in and be the running back 1 immediately for fantasy and for their team. But I just, the Browns have no interest. I mean, we've seen what Chubb and Hunt could do when they're both healthy, and they're going to need them those first 11 games. I mean, if you have an idea what Tressel ball is, if you're familiar with Jim Tressel's tenure at Ohio State, the Browns are going to run the ball, try and play solid defense, and win with special teams, because that's what they're going to be for 11 games, in my opinion.
I remember when Jim Tressel would drive a Lloyd car every single day to work, if you get that reference with Lloyd, the head coach of Michigan. Okay, thank you. A little esoteric thing there. All right, let's go around the frames, rapid fire. I'm going to name you 3 running backs. List them in order for me. Nate, we'll start with you. Mixon, Chubb, Najee.
Format. Half.
It's half, right?
Half. Yeah. Najee, Mixon, Chubb, from a fantasy perspective. Real life, I'd put Chubb number 1 as far as my ideal running back, with Mixon 2 and then Najee 3, but fantasy that order.
All right, Tyler, you.
I'll go Mixon, Najee, Chubb.
And Josh?
I'm gonna go Mixon first. I agree with Tyler there. Then I'm gonna go Chubb because his cost is better, and then Najee. I just don't see Najee getting the insane amount of touches that he did, and he was so inefficient last year. I do, and with their offensive line, I'm not spending my first. What's Najee going?
Probably around 8.5.
Yeah,
right?
he is
5, 7 overall.
Yeah, he is. I'm not spending the 8th pick on Najee Harris. I'm not spending a top 10 pick on him. I don't think he's worth it. So at cost, I'm going Mixon, Chubb, and then Harris.
Yeah, in situations like this, whether it's a PPR or a standard or non-PPR, follow the offensive line is my philosophy when I'm trying to invest a first-round pick into a running back. We've heard reports come out of Steelers camp that they're trying to use Najee Harris a little bit less this season than they did last season. With all the turmoil at the quarterback position and what's bound to be the receiving game for the Cleveland Browns, that can only mean good thing for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. If Kareem Hunt was not on the Browns right now, and I get Dearness Johnson is there and he had that great game or a couple games last year, I would have had Mixon, taken my chances with Najee, and then put Chubb after that. But I think Stefanski can find a way to get these 2 running backs on the field like he did a couple years ago to make one of them be the receiving back, one of them being the true running back. So, I think the Hunt-Chubb thing is going to feed off each other pretty well. So I totally agree with you, Josh, there. Okay, let's go to now, speaking of Kareem Hunt, let's start with you, Josh, and we'll go around the frames back the other way. If you had a chance to have Kareem Hunt or J.K. Dobbins, who would you rather have?
I'm taking Kareem Hunt all day, especially he's 84 right now, running back 33. You got to think, I mean, his last healthy season, he finished running back 11 in 2020 while Chubb finished RB 10. So there's a way they both can succeed and be RB ones. Give me Kareem Hunt all day. He's healthy. I mean, he's really got to prove it. Let's be honest. He's in a contract year. I mean, the Browns already did right by him and renegotiated. He wants more money now, but I don't think they're going to do it. So he's really playing for his next gig next year. So give
Tyler?
me
Yeah. I literally just second everything Josh said. There's nothing really I could add to
that. Nate?
Yeah, I'm right there with. I want to find the stat. I know at one point I had seen it where actually both Chubb and Hunt were better than when they had the other person in the lineup as far as like an overall per touch and per reception. Just each complemented each other so well that it goes against the grain of what we normally would think, because I think there's a lot of people that would go, man, once if Kareem Hunt's traded, Nick Chubb to the moon. And I think that he probably gains more touches. He gains some value, but I don't know, man. There's something about keeping both fresh and the right approach that Stefanski has.
So what I will say is week 1 through 6 last year, when they were both on the field and healthy, Kareem Hunt was the RB8 over that time frame. Nick Chubb was the RB14 over that time frame. It gets you to the point where I just wrote about the running back value in the AFC North for the AFC North article that we're releasing on Fantasy and Frames, and Nick Chubb is an incredible running back. He might be the best running back I've ever seen between the 20s. Kareem Hunt is a better receiving back, period. And unfortunately, I think Browns fans know this as much as they don't want to admit it. Kareem Hunt is a better goal line back than Nick Chubb. He just does a better job getting in there. So the two most valuable portions of fantasy football for a running back, Kareem Hunt is better at.
Speaking of valuable, if you head over to Trophy Smack today, see what I did there, and get your trophy today for your fantasy football league. We were there at the Fantasy Football Expo booth. Next to Trophy Smacks, their booth was insane. Matt Walsh, shout out to Matt Walsh. He was decked out in gear and garb, belts hanging off of him left and right. Their products are really, really good over at Trophy Smack. And if you use the promo code Fantasy in Frames, you get a free stunner ring to go with your fantasy football trophy or belt of purchase. Love their stuff. They're the best in the business for a reason. The people who work for Trophy Smack are some of the most awesome, humble people I've ever met. So please give them a follow and get their merchandise and get a free ring by using the promo code Fantasy in Frames. And with that little awkward segue, let's go into the tight end position here. Look, Mark Andrews. I mean, what's there to say about Mark Andrews that nobody else has said about Mark Andrews? Nothing, because he's great. Let me pump the brakes on that just 1 second. Is he everyone's tight end 2 or higher this season, Josh, for you in your rankings?
He is. I don't love this. I don't know if it's preseason hype or if they're really going to let Likely take some of his slot snaps, because obviously they want him on the line blocking more probably. And I feel like Andrews did a lot of his damage out of the slot last year. So, Andrews still my tight end too. I like Pitts a lot. Pitts has crazy upside, but Pitts' offense is terrible. So put Pitts on many other teams, and he's tight end 2, knocking on the tight end 1 door. But Andrews is my tight end 2 for now.
What about you, Nate?
Yeah, totally agree. I would like to roster Pitts more. I think he would be more fun to have on a fantasy team. But realistically, I think that, we will start getting frustrated with 7 for – we will never get frustrated with 7 for 85 per week. I mean, obviously that's an unattainable number, but the touchdowns could be lacking.
Tyler, in Pittsburgh, whether it's Pickett or Trubisky, does either quarterback really affect Freiermuth's value from a fantasy standpoint, or do you think he can be productive with whoever's throwing him the ball?
Another quarterback really, excites me. They're both going to cause Pat Freiermuth to be similarly productive. I actually have him for a pretty big target share this year, Pat Freiermuth. I got him for a 16% target share. which I think is attainable with Chase Claypool being weird and George Pickens being a rookie. So
Claypool being weird. Interesting. I never heard that before.
That is the expert level analysis you get here at Fantasy.
Let's go. Let's stay in Cleveland. Let's go back over to you, Josh. David Njoku. This time last year, he wanted out. I think he was doing a hold in or a hold out, whatever he was doing. He was not wanting to be on the roster for the Cleveland Browns. Played it out this year, got a contract. What are your thoughts on the usage of David Njoku? That he has been given that investment by the organization. Has there been any talk around the water cooler in terms of his value for fantasy managers?
I think he is criminally undervalued right now. He is going. I have his half PPR on Fantasy Pros at 171 and the 15th tight end off the board. And I really think that he can be, when it's all said and done, he could be the second on the team in most receiving categories. And if you look at Jacoby Brissett's history, back in 2017, Brissett started 15 games in Indianapolis and Jack Doyle was tight end 8. So the way his average depth of target in Njoku's and then basically, in Brissett's average, I feel like that's a great. They're going to get the ball in the hands of people that can make plays, and Njoku can do that. So I feel like Brissett is actually good for Njoku, if that makes sense. I don't know if anyone disagrees, but I think at tight end 15, 171, David Njoku is. I've been scooping him up late in all these underdog drafts, and I feel like he's a diamond in the rough right now.
Nice. We got a question from Jeb Armstrong over on YouTube. He's asking us a trade question. Would you trade Jonathan Taylor and Cortland Sutton for Alvin Kamara and CeeDee Lamb? He is also being offered Cook and CD for Taylor and Sutton. Only downfall is no Madison in the deal.
I'd imagine this is Dynasty.
Yeah, Jeb, is this Dynasty or redraft leagues? If you can answer that question, that'll help us.
I think the answer is the same for me either way.
I agree.
It's
I wouldn't give it.
Taylor and Sutton all day.
Right. Easy. Yeah.
There we go. Jeb.
Well, and with the news also, I mean, granted, I don't know if it's news or not in New Orleans. We know that the prosecutor who took on the case for the plaintiffs against Deshaun Watson is taken on and urging the NFL to take action against Alvin Kamara, which may or may not be anything. As Drew had mentioned, Drew Davenport, who's on retainer for us all for the fantasy site. Everybody paid Drew money for being on retainer. We owe him a lot. But he even said, he's like, that's his job though at Buzzy, is to be a loudmouth and to try to get motion and action. And that might mean nothing. He doesn't think it is anything, but you have to be a little certain. So if the trade was already lopsided before, the potential, suspension even looming has to decrease that trade for me, even where it's an auto decline.
Yeah, and to follow up with that, Nate, it's Drew. I think he went through a long kind of thread. It was his thread's always the most useful, I would say, of all the fantasy community. But he said that there's a big X factor out there, that video, where now it's just kind of an idea. Okay, Alvin Kamara got in a bar fight, but allegedly that video is pretty graphic. And if that ever gets released, or if that's then I think the NFL is going to be on PR damage control, which right now Kamara doesn't have, where Watson does, where the PR is just coming out against him. But if that
am I the only one that saw the aftermath of that?
I haven't seen anything.
I haven't seen it now.
Hey, Kamara almost killed that guy.
That's what I've heard. That's
what I heard too. Right.
He beat the ever loving crap out of him. Mm-hmm. Like he legitimately almost committed manslaughter.
Wow.
Yeah. So the video comes out. It's
right.
It won't be great. But again, they pushed it off again. We don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Let's move on. The answer is no to the trade, Jeb. Sorry.
Yeah. Just tell him
he forgot the answer already. He's like, did they say what I'm supposed to do? Because right now I feel like I'm in people's court.
Yeah, I'd rather have both those guys in Dynasty and especially redraft. I'd rather have Taylor and Sutton all day. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Dynasty, and we can mix in some redraft in there, Taylor, let's go to you. Gus Edwards, likely not going to be playing for a pretty long time with the Baltimore Ravens. Your guy, Tyler Batty, if I'm saying that correctly, it's Batty, right? Not Beatty, not right? Batty.
I thought it was Beatty.
Okay, my bad.
I could
Tyler
be wrong.
Beatty
I could be wrong.
I thought it was Batty. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know either.
Tomato, however, Jorge, George, whatever you want to do.
I'll bring up Dame Brugler's draft guide and fact check this.
You do that. For Dynasty, obviously, it makes sense why somebody would want to take a flyer on Beatty or Batty. For redraft, late round, no Gus Edwards for a while. Is he even worth it? Or is he somebody just going to leave on the waiver wire and just keep an eye on?
I'm not touching any running back starting week 1 in Baltimore. I mean, I'll still absolutely draft J.K. Dobbins in my leagues because he's falling down. What is he? He's running back 24 right now, and he is the overall. I'm checking. I'll tell you in a second. He's running back 27, and he's 61 overall. If I can take him in the start of the 6th round and have a potential RB1 starting in like week 3 or 4, I'll do it all day. But either way, they're going to split carries for the first few weeks of the year. It's going to be J.K. Dobbins. It's going to be Mike Davis. It's going to be Tyler Beatty. It's going to be Lamar Jackson. So none of them really interest me outside of J.K. Dobbins.
All right, Josh, let's go back to you for some Browns talk. Amari Cooper. I think a lot of us did not see this happening in the offseason of all the places he could have gone. He's in Cleveland. Next year, he'll have Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. He doesn't have him right now. What have you been hearing about Amari Cooper in terms of his potential role and usage in this offense with Jacoby Brissett being the quarterback?
I mean, I don't chart out target share, but he's going to get a pretty massive target share, I would say. I mean, you got to look at the receiver room. I mean, it's him. It's Peoples-Jones, who's a deep threat. It's David Bell, who's a rookie, who I really like, but is going to take some time to develop. And then, I mean, after that, it's pretty much a wing and a prayer. Anthony Schwartz is fast, but I don't think he can catch. He hasn't shown me he can actually catch the ball at all. So Cooper's going to get a high target share. I'm not sure the value of the targets, but there's no one else there, and he's still an excellent route runner. I mean, Jacoby Brissett's been saying so in practice. He shined in the joint practice with the Eagles. It's his ceiling is low. I mean, right now he's wide receiver 26, 64. If you're going wide receiver heavy and you got to start 3, he'd be a good wide receiver. Late wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. I think he's going to get a high target share. I just don't think he's going to see the kind of high value targets that he did in Dallas, if that makes sense.
As I'm scrolling down looking for the ADP, here we go. Amari Cooper is currently the wide receiver 26, 64 overall. Would you rather wait and draft Amari Cooper or pay up for the number 12 wide receiver overall, number 12 wide receiver and 30 overall in T. Higgins?
I would say T. Higgins because he has a higher ceiling, but I'm okay with getting Cooper there though and taking. This is a hard one. I'm going to pass this one for a minute. I'm going to be honest with you because I love Higgins' ceiling, but right. I mean Cooper has no one to really compete at the receiver position, with targets. So Higgins has one of the best receivers in the game, and then Boyd, who's very serviceable. So I don't know.
Nate, Higgins, Cooper.
Man, I agree with some of this stuff. Besides I agreed to pass the answer, which I do agree to do that as well. I have to look at just like really that second half of the season where T. Higgins started to see even a higher target share than Jamar. Not that that's sustainable, but as a whole, and Josh, you said you don't you don't do market share. I try to avoid it at some cost because it's very misleading in some regards, especially when they have quarterback changes and things of that nature. But in Cincinnati, T had a 24.7% target share compared to 23.7. So Burrow of all quarterbacks is sustainable to receivers, both at around the 25% share. And with that passing volume, we have to assume that the ceiling is higher. And I'm going to say the floor is probably the same as Amari Cooper. So I'm going to shoot for the ceiling. By the way.
Yeah, when I say I don't do, I just meant I didn't like chart it myself. I mean, I use it. I like to use it as a reference. But yeah, you're right. If you're going for ceiling, it's got to be Higgins.
Now let's talk about ceiling for another player here in the AFC North. Let's go to the Steelers. George Pickens. He has been impressing and impressing and impressing. I feel like every single day he's been with the Steelers since draft day. There's been talk that he's supplanted Chase Claypool on the receivers depth chart. I don't know if that's like official, or that just was official for the first preseason game. Let's say that it is going to be official, and it's Deontay Johnson and George Pickens 1 and 2. Tyler, are you drinking the Kool-Aid on George Pickens in terms of redraft value, or are you going to pump the brakes and kind of let the old adage of rookie wide receivers need time to develop take over?
I think George Pickens is extremely talented. I think Deontay Johnson is the best wide receiver on that team. I think Chase Claypool is a good wide receiver. I think Pat Freiermuth is a good tight end. And I am not betting on George Pickens getting all kinds of volume in that offense. I mean, I don't know what his ADP is, but I can tell you here shortly.
It is. He is 136, wide receiver 54 and a half PPR. So 136 overall.
All right. See, when we're talking about a 12th round pick like that, sure, I'll take a shot on Pickens over some of the other guys in that range just to see what happens. But I do not firmly believe that George Pickens will have a big impact on redraft fantasy football.
Well, another wide receiver here at the AFC North, Rashad Bateman. Is he going to have an impact in fantasy football here for Baltimore Ravens, given the fact that normally it's been the Mark Andrews show and that's it? Or are we, it's another year in the league now. Bateman has shown a rapport with Jackson in all the offseason videos and training camp montages and whatnot. Are we buying this, Josh? Are we buying Rashad Bateman as a potential wide receiver 2 and or flex in your half PPR league?
Yeah, I feel good about it. I don't feel great about it. I mean, they can't just throw to Andrews all the time. I think Bateman at his cost, wide receiver 35, is a very good. He has some upside play. Obviously, they just don't throw the ball enough to really feel good about it. But I'm betting on his talent and in that market share, the target share, he's going to get it. He's going to get those opportunities as long as he stays healthy. So I definitely take a chance on him, and I have in some leagues or in some situations, especially where you guys start 3 receivers. He'd be a good wide receiver 3 flex option. Yes.
Nate, would you agree there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you give me a wide receiver 3 that has a potential, and Tyler, I'll ask you to verify what you have, Matt. I would say he's probably a 27% target share, I'm guessing, for that team. And you give me a wide receiver 3 with that, even though the floor and the ceiling both are compromised with that, team that runs 60% of the time. I'm still comfortable, like Josh said. What you got, Tyler?
I got him at 23, and I still feel like that is enough with touchdowns. I love Rashad Bateman at his cost. I'm very conservative when I'm going through these projections. I gave J.K. Dobbins a decent target share. I gave Devin Duvernay a little bit of a target share, but 23% is probably his floor for market share in that offense. And 120 plus, 130 plus targets is not out of range. Marquis Brown was the wide receiver 22 last year in this offense, and I think he should outproduce Marquis Brown.
Somebody who years ago, like I say that like it's like 10 years ago, but like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, everybody was like chomping at the bits to get him in the later rounds of drafts in terms of value. And last year, things just kind of fell off for him. And I'm talking about Tyler Boyd. We had Bob Lung on a couple days before the Fantasy Football Expo, and he was actually praising Tyler Boyd and the fact that with this new revamped offensive line for Cincinnati, Burrow's going to have more time to find the short to intermediate receivers. Hayden Hurst is there, but he's no CJ Uzoma. Are we back on Tyler Boyd there, Josh, or is he still somebody that for where he's going? Let me find him really quickly.
I got him at 131, wide receiver 51.
Thank you.
I mean,
you have Boyd or Landry, Tyler Boyd or Jarvis Landry. Let's put it like that.
Are they both at the? Are we looking at the same cost?
Yes.
ADP wise.
Yeah.
I can't trust Michael Thomas is healthy, so I'm gonna take a shot at Jarvis Landry. Honestly, I think I'm going Landry, but Boyd has crazy upside. If Higgins or Chase were to miss any time, or I mean, Boyd would be right back in there. He'd be almost an every week starter. But give me Landry because I'm a huge Chris Olave fan, but I think Landry is going to be the sturdier option of the New Orleans Saints wide receivers. As long as Michael Thomas is, who the heck knows, he's got that 5. He's on that 4-year injury plan. So I don't know. So,
Nate. Mm-hmm. Would you take the consistency of Tyler Boyd or the upside of George Pickens as a rookie?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I'm going to go with the right arm of Joe Burrow over whatever they have in Pittsburgh. Just consistency, because even despite this down year for Tyler Boyd, quote unquote, last year he was still in half point. He was still the wide receiver 29. I mean, he's been for the last 4 years, he's been 15, 22, 33, 29. Granted, you didn't have Jamar Chase those years, but I think it just seems safe. It's going to be boring. The problem with some of those weeks with Tyler Boyd is you might get a 333 week and it's going to crush you. You're never going to get a 7-150 out of him. I think we know that. You just hope to get the 7 for 50 and a touchdown.
Very cool. All right, and with that, we kind of cruise through the AFC North. That's pretty awesome. And as we said earlier in the show, we're doing both divisions in the North, both the AFC and NFC. So let's jump into the NFC right now. Let's talk about the quarterback position. Let's talk about the receiver-less Green Bay Packers, words that I never thought I would actually say aloud. But you lose Devontae Adams, and automatically that means you have no wide receivers anymore, right? Right? Or are we kind of milking this? Are we kind of being a little too extreme here and forgetting that they do have Aaron Rodgers, who helped make Greg Jennings fantasy viable for years, who helped make Jordy Nelson fantasy viable for years.
What is with this hate on Greg Jennings and Jordy Nelson?
I'm not saying that hate. What I'm saying is he helped them he's found wide receivers to make fantasy viable. Over the course of his time in Green Bay, from Jennings to Nelson, there was a time where Devontae Adams, they wasn't even sure they were going to bring him back because he had so many drops. And then all of a sudden, things just came together and clicked after 2013, 2014. So where I'm going with this is you look at the wide receivers that they have now. They have Randall Cobb, they have Sammy Watkins, they have Romeo Doubs, they have Christian Watson. And automatically people are saying, well, it's not Devontae Adams, so therefore we're just going to keep lowering our stock in Aaron Rodgers. Is that really warranted, or are we forgetting that this guy is a multiple-time MVP and can actually turn water into wine from a fantasy football perspective? Josh, am I too high on Rodgers? Am I too low? What are your thoughts?
No,
here?
you are right on point on Aaron Rodgers. Look, I mean, right now he's gone 95 overall, QB 10. He's priced at his floor. I mean, he finished QB 10, I think. Finished QB 11 in 2019, and then he was QB 3 in 2020, or QB 7 last season. But if we're talking, I know you're talking about Bob Lund consistency. Rodgers is that model of consistent quarterback play that you want to have. I mean, I have a 6-point league, and I bet Rodgers will go in the first, because people draft quarterbacks way too early. He'll probably go in the first 5 rounds. I wouldn't be surprised. And this is the stat I found in the last 2 seasons that blew my mind. Aaron Rodgers has finished as a QB1 in 71.9% of his starts. That's
wow.
That's the guy I want as my starting quarterback with crazy upside. Yes, Allen Lazard is not as good as Devontae Adams. It's just the truth. But I feel like Rodgers will find a way. I can see Aaron Jones being one of the leaders and targets of this team. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Romeo Doubs is there. I feel like Sammy Watkins, he'll have a good first few weeks and then disappear forever. And then there's, Robert Tonyan. I'm buying Rodgers all day. I will, and I'll probably draft him a round or 2 early, because I feel like that's that kind of consistency I want on my team all day.
I was just say I've seen myself leaning in a lot of these leagues. Jorge, and Tyler had the chance to draft in Kings Classic, and one of the things with that league is a 4-point passing touchdown and a full 2-point interception penalty. And at that point, you start looking and you're thinking, wow, that you get these ratios, this 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio guys, and all of a sudden they start becoming even more and more valuable. And I looked and I thought, how many double-digit interception seasons has Aaron Rodgers had in his 16-year career, Jorge?
14.
You think he's had 14 double-digit interception seasons?
Oh, sorry. 3.
I was like, you were hyping this guy, and now you're shooting. Like,
sorry, I thought you were talking about. No, sorry. I'm going to go 3.
Lower.
Wow.
I think it's 1.
Is it his first year? Probably.
It's technically it is. It's his first start. It's 2008 where he had a 28-13 ratio, and then 2010 where he was 28-11. And since then, he's never had more than 8, and he's had multiple 2, 3s, and then occasionally 5 and 6. You're seeing a consistent. I mean, on average, let's see. He's about a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio over his career, and it's safe and. It's sure the upside's not as great without Devontae Adams, but I don't think we'll be shocked if he ends up with 4,400, 35 and 8. I mean, that's just kind of what I could see.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy when you look at 2 quarterbacks in this division, Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields, 2 quarterbacks I didn't think I'd be comparing side by side in this manner.
Yeah.
You know, the teams are really relying on these quarterbacks to produce. They don't really have a lot around them. Well, I guess Green Bay does in the running game. Sure, let's throw that in there. But, you know, everyone likes to talk about the cheat code, the scrambling quarterbacks and get those rushing yards. Give me Aaron Rodgers over Justin Fields, even if Justin Fields is going to be running for his life this year. I understand the value in those rushing yards, but man, it's hard for me to fade Aaron Rodgers. I mean, ADP is showing right now that it's clearly Aaron Rodgers over Justin Fields. But speaking of Justin Fields, let's talk about him and the little connection we saw this last week with the Bears taking on the Seahawks. Cole Kmet, all those Cole Kmet truthers out there. I am not one of them, not because I hate Cole Kmet or I have ill feelings towards Cole Kmet. I truly just, out of all the fantasy football players I've invested my time researching in, he has just not been one of them, which apparently I'm behind the 8 ball with this. But when I'm watching this game versus the Seahawks, it basically was, there's another pass to Cole Kmet. Oh, well, there's another pass to Cole Kmet. This guy's target share is going to be ridiculous this year. Is this probably one of the best quarterback tight end combinations in the NFC North, Tyler? Let's think about this. We got Rodgers, Tunyon, right?
Yeah.
We got Goff, Hawkinson.
Mm-hmm.
We got Irv Smith, assuming he's healthy, good to go, Kirk Cousins. And we got Kmet and Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, I'm out on Irv Smith for the most part. I know I'm kind of in the minority there, I feel like. Tunyon, I don't trust at all. I think Josiah DeGuara might play more than him. I like the Goff, Hawkinson stack, but if I'm picking a stack, I'm going with the value stack. I'm going with Justin Fields as the QB 17. I'm going with Cole Kmet in the 8th round as the tight end 11. So it 100%. Yeah. If I have to choose a stack to draft and play throughout the year, it's going to be the Bears Fields Kmet stack. I liked Kmet coming out of Notre Dame. I mean, Fields, I'm hoping he can progress a little bit, but they didn't really give him the tools to do so. But he's still going to have his legs. He's still going to present that rushing floor, and he's not going to kill you on a week-to-week basis. So, yeah, I agree with that statement, Jorge.
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I guess if you're making me pick a stack from this division, then sure, I guess. I mean, hey, if you're gonna make me do it, it's something you're gonna do. I feel bad as a Buckeye who saw Justin Fields come in and just really wow us as a quarterback. The Bears are doing him dirty, I'm afraid. I feel like they're setting him up to fail. Not setting him up, but they, like you mentioned, they've done nothing literally for him. I mean, I like Darnell Mooney, but their offensive line's atrocious. I feel like this new regime's gonna ship him out of town, and he's gonna struggle this year just because they've not helped him succeed. So I like Fields' upside, but it would be a stretch for him to finish as in the top 15 of quarterbacks, in my opinion.
Hey, so Tyler brought up something in regards to Tunyon and not having any faith in Tunyon. For me, when I'm looking at quarterback quarterback tight end stacks. I mean, this guy, he's bound to get some more targets, right? I mean, though Devontae Adams, he's a big target in the red zone. The passes are not going to be going to Sammy Watkins' way. Lazard is not really a huge target in the red zone. I mean, this guy has a lot of touchdown upside, I think, if he can stay healthy. Is that something that people should be kind of thinking about during the drafts, or do you go for the safer, quote-unquote, safer bet with Fields' commit stack?
I mean, the question is going to be, to stay healthy, you have to become healthy. And I think that's the slow path that is concerning. Now, sure, you wait till you want to have 2 tight ends in a specific league, depending upon your format, depending upon your depth and bench and everything else. I mean, he was the tight end 3 in 2020. Granted, that's a little bit removed, and it was 5th in points per game. It's, the upside is there, and that's with Devontae Adams, and that's a unit that was designed to go through him originally, but he established that rapport and that trust with Rodgers, and Rodgers gives trust in you in the red zone, and you're going to see plenty of targets. I still just worry that I think in his time off, if it's off, I think Josiah DeGuara might actually eat into that just a little bit more and see both of those two. I'm not too confident in Kenyon. Let's put it that way. Short and sweet. Sorry for the drawn out.
No, that's good. It's good. Tyler, you talked about, I guess in passing, you talked about Jared Goff and TJ Hawkinson. And let's take a minute and just let's enjoy Hard Knocks for what it is. For those who don't know what Hard Knocks is, it's an HBO special every year during training camp season, where it's like the 4 weeks of training camp where the producers of HBO films, they go and they document the training camp for the whatever team that they're following that year. And this year it's the Detroit Lions. Man, if I ever played football, I'd want Dan Campbell to be my head coach. This guy is a motivator. He's a talker. He backs it up. The very first episode of Hard Knocks, he was doing up down. He was doing burpees with his players. He went like 30 rounds of burpees with his players. This guy is exactly the type of guy you want to be playing for. But sticking with Detroit, Hawkins, let's talk about Jared Goff. You go quickly, Josh. I know you got to run pretty soon, so before we get going,
sure.
Jared Goff in a 2-quarterback league, is he somebody that you're targeting as your second quarterback, or is he somebody that you're just like, no, not yet?
I want to be my 3rd quarterback ideally, because there are some weapons on here. I mean, sorry, I do got to run a couple minutes, but Deandre Swift is great running back. I mean, Amari St. Brown and I really find me a bounce back season from DJ Shark all day. And then I'd say probably week 7-8 when they get Jameson Williams back and then Hawk. I like a little bit of Goff's upside. I mean, it's going to be a run first team, first of all, unfortunately, but I like Goff as a low end QB2. Like I'm stacking my super flex team, and then I'm going to get Jared Goff in the later rounds. But and you talked about Dan Campbell. Sorry, just say one more thing. I really do think that if Dan Campbell coached the 2017 Browns, that they would have had 3 or 4 wins, in my opinion. I mean, I think they would have won a few games, not 1-0-16. I think there was more talent on that, talent in quotes, than he had last year, was able to win several games and took the Ravens, some other teams, to the max. So I feel like he's a good coach, a very good coach, and put good coordinators around him. And I feel like they can turn it around. And, he's not Hugh Jackson. He's not, Rod Marinelli, where there's not much talent and the team's just going to crumble. So if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And Josh, we know you got to go. And I just want to say thank you very much for joining us here in Fourth and Frames. It's great talking shop with you. It's great running into you every year in Canton. Tell the people where they can find you and where they can find your work.
Yeah. Follow me at Josh Brickner on Twitter. Do a lot of my fantasy football. If you want to see me, implode in real time watching the Browns and through the week, that's where you'll see me tweeting about how much I hate Jimmy Haslam and referees and coordinators and all that good stuff. Also, I'll be writing for DLF this year, hoping to do a sink or swim kind of panic or not panic of players to buy and sell during the year as well. So.
Nice. Everybody, if you come out to the expo next year, which you should, make it a point to introduce yourself to Josh Brickner. This guy is a fantastic human being. He's he's one of the good people out there that you want to make friends with, and I really value our friendship, bud. So thank you very much.
Oh, same here, Jorge. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over these last 3 years. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And good luck to the Browns this season.
That's right. Go Browns.
And good luck to all your fantasy teams, because I don't think we're playing each other. So I can say that.
We're not. Oh, no. We're not. So we're good.
Okay. So good luck.
Good to see you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. You too, Josh. See you, buddy.
Good luck, guys. Thanks.
What a good guy. Love Josh Brickner. All right, let's stick with Detroit. He mentioned it's going to be a run-oriented team here, Deandre Swift. Am I the only one who's not really a big Deandre Swifter? I feel like everyone on social media I see talking about the Detroit Lions and fantasy relevance. It's got these great running backs in the NFC North. We got Aaron Jones, we got Dalvin Cook, we got AJ Dillon, we got DeAndre Swift. I'm like, where did he come from? Like, I understand when he was healthy, he was on pace to produce X. He was the RB so-and-so during said time. Show me when he was the RB for an entire season. Yeah, that's just my thought right there. I mean, can you really invest somebody who hasn't shown a track record of being able to stay healthy his entire career with such a high draft pick? I don't know. That's just, maybe I'm wrong. Nate, am I wrong? Am I crazy?
I mean, I am a truther in the fact that I have him as my RB9, and if you show me a full season is a fair statement. But he's only played 13 games in consecutive seasons, and he's never finished outside the RB2 conversation. He's been the RB20 in both of those, despite missing 7 games between the 2 years. Up until, like you said, you can go in hyperbole, up until that AC joint sprain. Yes, he was the RB7. He was averaging nearly 20 touches a game, almost 100 yards. The thing that I like for him is the fact that, from a target share perspective, he's always in the top 2 or 3. He has been, at least almost a 20% target share. So I think that just helps keep that floor so high, in that I know they're going to look his direction if he can stay healthy. And I hate to saying if he can stay healthy, because I'll never go into a season drafting, and I might make a tie-break decision, but I'll never overlook a person strictly because they've missed 7 games over the course of 2 years. I'm backing on CMC, backing on Saquon this year. Call me crazy, but I do. I'm a Swifter.
So I'm looking at our rankings here over at fantasyandframes.com, which if you go and click on our rankings page, it is pretty extensive. We got our draft rankings. We got our IDP draft rankings. We have soon to have our weekly rankings, our weekly IDP rankings, Dynasty for both formats, best ball, sleeper rankings. Yes, we have our sleeper rankings up for this year. And I'm looking here at our rankings. And if I say rankings one more time, I'm going to slap myself. Or one of you can jump to the screen and slap me. I have my RB14. Tyler, he's your RB7. Everybody else here at Fantasy Frames has him below their RB10. What do you like about him this year, Tyler?
Receiving. He had 78 targets in 13 games last year. He's one of the few running backs in the league that can actually push 100 targets. Rushing, I've got him only around 200 or so carries. He's still going to be their primary goal line back. And we got to remember, Detroit, if they have one unit that is for real on their team, it's their offensive line. Mm-hmm. They have a good offensive line. Even with as bad as this team has been, DeAndre Swift has averaged 4.6 and 4.1 yards per carry in the first 2 seasons of his career. He's never averaged less than 7.3 yards per reception. Call the Lions what you want. You can call a spade a spade. They're not going to be a great team. 7 wins is probably a big deal for them. They have a good offensive line, and DeAndre Swift has never not been an efficient running back. And I dare to say that this is the best Lions team that Swift has played on. So, yeah, give me all that receiving upside. Give me all those touches. I'm in.
Speaking of receiving upside and touches, let's go to Green Bay and let's talk about Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. Matt LaFleur came out a couple of days ago, or was it yesterday? Yesterday, I think, where he said it's the 1A in 1A, or it was 1A and 1B. I forget his exact phrasing, referring to the usage of Jones and Dillon this year. You know, a lot of us are thinking, you know, in the fantasy community that AJ Dillon's going to be like the bruising running back and Aaron Jones is going to be the receiving running back. Is that kind of how you're viewing things here with these two running backs from Green Bay, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, if you have to place a role on them, I think both are capable of doing dual duty. I do believe that it will be. There's a good chance, and we've said this, I think, ad nauseum now, is that Aaron Jones will lead the team in targets and maybe potentially receptions, or maybe both. Because I mean, he was already he was sixth amongst all running backs last year. He had 62 receptions or 64 receptions in 15 games. So definitely doable. I think that we'll see both of those. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Aaron Rodgers and how he wants to have his best 11 on the field. It might have been emphasis just to say, I want Aaron Jones here. I want AJ Dillon back here and move him around, get him open in space, at least Aaron Jones. It's a dangerous dual running back threat. Maybe the most dangerous we've seen. No offense to Cleveland.
Exactly. You're talking about the target share and AJ and Aaron Jones, excuse me. And we go to Minnesota and we have their new head coach, who his name escapes me. He was the quarterback's coach for the Rams.
Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah. Kevin O'Connell. Thank you, Rich. He was also with Washington, and we let another great coach get away there. So yay, Washington Commanders. I had to work that into the show. You know, guys, I'm a huge Commanders fan. And we hear that Dalvin Cook's going to be used more in the receiving game, and I'm like, okay. And then you go to Green Bay, and it's like, well, Aaron Jones is going to be used more in the receiving game, and I'm like, okay. I'm looking at my rankings here, and I have Dalvin Cook as my RB5. I have Aaron Jones as my RB9. Did I make a goof? Should these guys be closer together, or is there like a clear reason why Dalvin Cook should be a few spots higher than Aaron Jones, Tyler?
I think the reason is workload. I mean, I agree that Aaron Jones might well be the leading receiver on the Green Bay Packers, but you know, even if that is the case, 700 yards, which is awesome for a running back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Dalvin Cook, hopefully he can play 16 games. You know, he's consistently played 14. If they can keep him on the field, if they can even give him a few breathers with Madison, and his receiving work kicks up to 70 targets and his rushing work is still sitting around 250, I personally think that the Vikings can be a top 10 NFL offense. So, which gives Dalvin Cook every opportunity in the world to have one of those big blow-up seasons like Joe Mixon did last year. We forget Joe Mixon had 16 touchdowns last year. There's no reason Dalvin Cook can't hit those touchdown numbers. So I feel really good about Cook this year.
Hey, Nate, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
And this has probably been answered years ago, but I just want to make sure we're still on this train here. You know the old adage, you don't draft your own handcuff, you always go after somebody else's handcuff just because you want to have that competitive advantage when you're drafting, like the game within the game.
Mm-hmm.
Is Dalvin Cook still that guy that if you're drafting him, you have to get Madison and pay up for him? Or with the emergence of all these other running backs that provide so much value as RB2s, is this kind of a year where you can be like, you know what, I don't need Alexander Madison? And then you like stop cringing, and you cringe for a second, and you're like, no, I really believe I don't need Alexander Madison if I'm the Dalvin Cook manager.
I've stuck with the do not take your own handcuff design for so long. It's hard for me not to get away from that. You know what I found? That the best way to get and not spend the draft capital is typically the person who drafts Alexander Madison after the first 4 weeks of him not getting used and just occupying a bench spot. Typically that person has some type of weakness or something that I can work a trade, even if it's a 1-for-1, and I can throw Alexander Madison as the supplemental piece. Not to do, so I don't want to do 2-for-1 and give up a ton, but that's the problem with handcuffs is they eventually start sitting on your roster at the very bottom, and you're just watching that, and especially limited bench space, and you go, man, I really would like to pick somebody up, but I don't want to drop Alexander Madison because what if Dalvin Cook gets hurt? And so he just sits there and he just festers, and eventually you can occupy a person. I'm not saying that's a super tip trick or anything, but it is something for the managers out there. Usually the return you can get on trade is half the price of what the draft capital would cost you to get Alexander Madison.
Looking at my Kings Classic roster here, and I have Dalvin Cook, and I'm just going to skip over the fact that I have Alexander Madison, but that's just my bias there. I can't do it. I understand everything you're saying, man. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Here's an example. I can say that I have done that. Tyler, we both did, because we have Alvin Kamara in our Kings Classic auction for $36, I believe, and we got Mark Ingram for $1. Now, for $1, I'm fine with that because that is basically a last round pick. If Kamara misses 6 weeks, he's going to be the main recipient of those touches or those lack of touches. So, yeah, I'm not judging anybody that does it because guess what? It's paid dividends for the last 2 years with Dalvin Cook. Alexander Madison has had RB1 weeks in those absences. So, better than a waiver wire.
No, exactly.
With Madison and with Madison's value, it's kind of been the running joke of, get Madison if you get Cook, get Madison if you get Cook. I think it's kind of normalized a bit to where, like 2 years ago, if you drafted Dalvin Cook, you're going to have to spend a freaking 9th round pick on Alexander Madison because everyone's like, oh, yeah, Dalvin Cook's going to get injured like 2 weeks into the season. Mm-hmm. And people are realizing like, no, he plays pretty consistently. So I think the draft cost of Alexander Madison is sufficiently tanked.
Hey, I mean, I'm not complaining.
No, you shouldn't.
Speaking of complaining or not complaining, let's go to Chicago. And something tells me I'm going to err to the side of complaining. David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert. If you read our Dynasty Target articles over the summer, you will have known we talked about Khalil Herbert. Played great when Montgomery was out last year. Great in open space, very elusive. In fact, PFF had him and David Montgomery neck and neck in terms of their grading at all the various metrics that they look at over there. With one of the deficiencies being in the receiving game for Khalil Herbert. Oh darn, he can't be perfect. We'll just have to muddle through. We got the new offensive coordinator for the Bears coming over from the Green Bay Packers, who the Packers, obviously, they've in recent years known how to balance a two running back committee approach there with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Are we expecting that right off the bat, for Montgomery and Herbert? And in redraft, Tyler, are you targeting Khalil Herbert at all?
Yes. I mean, I'll target Khalil Herbert. So his draft cost is very low right now. So if we're talking one of the last picks in my draft, sure, I'll grab Khalil Herbert because I am truly curious to see how they are going to design this offense. I really think it could be a run-heavy approach, even running with Justin Fields a bit, and they could absolutely make use of both of these running backs. So you're talking about a guy that you might be able to flex. So I finally found him. He's a running back 57. He's 160 overall. Wow. Yeah. So you're talking one of the last picks of your draft. There is potential that you could flex him week in and week out. And then there's an injury to David Montgomery, and then all of a sudden he's a top 15 running back. So, yeah, I will absolutely target Herbert with one of the very last picks of my draft.
So let me ask you a question. And this is, Nate, let me ask you a question now. And this is probably going to sound kind of stupid. I'm just prefacing this ahead of time, but maybe there's somebody out there who is thinking this. Let's say Montgomery goes down and Herbert's the RB1 there. Would you rather have Khalil Herbert as the RB1 on a Chicago Bears team that has not a great offensive line? Mm-hmm. Or would you rather have on your bench or pick up maybe during the season a Jamal Williams who may have to take over for a Deandre Swift with an awesome offensive line?
So Man, I mean, I would probably lean towards Jamal Williams. I think Jamal Williams has also proven it a little bit more over the history of his career, and I think a lot of that probably, and this is not me not knowing this, so I'm just kind of gauging. Is something tells me Jamal Williams, number one, first of all, if you watch Hard Knocks,
Awesome.
you can't not want Jamal Williams on your team. That is passion. That is straight desire to play. But I also believe that he has to be more than adequate in pass protection. He's obviously good at catching the ball. He's a well-rounded running back, which means that you're not worried about him being in a split backfield. Not that they have that in Chicago, because I think it happens there. But I think I would lean Jamal Williams. That being said, here's a little bit of breaking news for everybody, not to do with the NFC North, but Tyron Smith apparently, did you see that about an hour ago while we were talking? Went down in practice with semi-non-contact to his left knee. They're speculating potential. It looked like an ACL injury. It's very early in its stages, but not to switch topics. I know this isn't a breaking news segment. This isn't Sports Center or anything, but do you drop? How far down do you move Zeke down even further?
Yeah. Move Dak down.
Yeah, everybody.
Even with that entire offense.
Even when Smith was healthy last week, I saw some video of the joint practices with the Broncos, and just when Bradley Chubb is schooling your offensive line, that something is wrong with your offensive line, and no disrespect to Bradley Chubb, even though that was blatant disrespect, but whatever. That I did not hear about that, so thank you very much for bringing that up. We may have to talk about that in our bold predictions episode in a couple weeks in terms of where we think these Cowboys players are going to go. Tyler, let me throw out a couple wide receiver names, just going through all the teams here, and you tell me in order which one. We'll do the rapid fire thing like we do with the running backs in the AFC North. Darnell Mooney, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Adam Thielen.
Ooh. I'm going to go Amon-Ra, Thielen, Mooney.
Nate?
I go Mooney, Amon-Ra, Thielen.
See, I'm going to go Thielen, Amon-Ra, Mooney.
That's
my so my rationale is look, if this Kevin O'Connell offense is supposed to be lighting the world on fire, and Thielen's looking like he had been before his injury, and this is going to be a pass-heavy offense. So we go back to the Los Angeles Rams when they had Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, and Cooper Kupp. All of them were fantasy viable. And with the red zone chemistry that he has with Kirk Cousins, I mean, give me all the touchdowns. I don't know. That's just – I guess he is 32 years old. Yes, you have to bring age into that factor. But why do you have Mooney as your number one, Nate?
Just total target share. We saw it last year in just really the first, I'd say, courting or dating period for these two, and it blew up. I mean, it was absolutely more than what we could have expected out of that. 140 targets. Now you have no Allen Robinson. Granted, I know that vacated targets does not always funnel to the other receiver. I get it. Their offensive line is bad, but 140 targets and yet only still 4 touchdowns tells me there's some positive touchdown regression that could happen. I think 1,000 years is there. I'm also not the biggest and I got to go back and say I was wrong. I was using my rankings and I overlooked. I actually have Amon-Ra third. I have Thielen second, and a lot of bit of is not hate against Amon-Ra, but it was that last half, man. That season ending, couple 6 games or so were just unsustainable. He was second behind Justin Jefferson only in targets, and I could be way wrong on that. And I still have him in as the end of my wide receiver 3, but I think Mooney just looks like he has kind of that it factor from what I've seen in game.
All right. So currently on our rankings, you have him as you have Amon-Ra as 41. I have him at 30. Tyler, you have him at 28. Why are you in on Ross St. Brown versus a Mooney there, Tyler?
I think it has something to do with just offensive situation and talent. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, it would be foolish to think that he's going to do what he did at the end of last year all season. They didn't have anyone else throw the ball to. But the thing is, they didn't have anyone else throw the ball to. And the defense knew that.
True.
And he was getting open consistently. And I think he built a good connection with Jared Goff. So I just feel good about it. Like I like watching him play. I like watching. I mean, it sounds silly, but I like the way he moves on the field.
I should have that song queued up.
Yeah, there you go.
If you know what I'm talking about. Okay, anyhow.
Yeah, I was playing in my head.
Yeah, it's kind of like it doesn't make me think of him, but just like watching Justin Jefferson play is so much fun. Just the way he runs routes and just his herky-jerky but still controlled movements. Like Amon-Ra has just kind of an explosive factor to the way he moves and the way he plays the game. So I just like him as a player.
So let's talk about Justin Jefferson. And I am scared of Justin Jefferson. And this is going to be something that is, I don't want to say it's controversial, but it's something that is factual. And I saw it happen last year. And I'm not going to get into the politics, and I'm not going to get into X, Y, and Z. It's no secret that Kirk Cousins and COVID kind of go hand in hand. Doesn't want to do the vaccine. Okay, whatever he wants to do. When Kirk Cousins was not the quarterback last week, who was it? It wasn't even Kellen Mond who they had come in there. I don't even remember who the quarterback was. He could not get the ball to Justin Jefferson. What am I trying to say? Justin Jefferson does not come across to me as a quarterback-proof wide receiver. And there has been precedent where Kirk Cousins has not been on the field when Justin Jefferson has been there. And when that's been the case, his fantasy value has tanked. And look, I don't want to go into a season and say, well, he's going to miss this many games. It's just like injuries. You don't want to say he's going to miss this many games due to COVID. But like, this is something that's been happening the past couple of years where he's missed some games. And it makes me a little bit cautious because you never know what's going to happen. I don't know. That's my own personal bias, my own personal stake. Look, I'm not saying don't draft Justin Jefferson, don't have him as your number one wide receiver overall. It's just for me that it scares me a little bit knowing that he is not a quarterback-proof player. Somebody like even Devontae Adams, when Aaron Rodgers missed that time with a broken collarbone for all those years, and I forget it was Tyler Huntley or somebody. Tyler Huntley was the quarterback for the Packers. Even then, Devontae Adams was still wide receiver 2 viable. The same could not be said for Justin Jefferson when Kirk Cousins has not been on the field. So somebody like a Devontae Adams, I consider to be quarterback proof. Justin Jefferson, I am not so sure. And I don't know whether the quarterback situation or the backup quarterback situation has gotten good or better. Has it? You how? How has it gotten better?
They just traded for Nick Mullins. He's not amazing, but Nick Mullins is a professional level quarterback that could sustain some production. It's better than Kellen Mond and whoever the heck else they had.
That's true. I'm happy with Nick Mullins there personally. I understand your point, Jorge, and that is something to take into consideration. I hate to ever use COVID and the potential for that. I mean, if we're talking about potential, if I don't like
it's like injuries. It's just like injuries. You don't want to like run that into your calculation of what you're projecting a player to be.
So do you have Justin Jefferson at or above or below wide receiver 3?
I have him as my 2. Cooper Kupp is 1.
Yeah, he's my 2. I have no problem with him at 1. In fact, actually, if I did, I went back and forth, only waiting for news from Matthew Stafford. And if that elbow were to act up, I would easily move Jefferson into 1, probably move Kupp down to about 3 or 4. And I you know what, honestly, I think I'm about to the point where I'm moving Diggs ahead of Chase. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I'm getting there. Not that I have anything against Chase, but I'm starting to come around more and more on T. Higgins. And I think that's just, it reduces the ceiling a little bit.
Interesting. I don't blame you, to be honest with you. I'm a huge fan of Stephon Diggs. Go Terps. Let's finish off with the tight end position. Well, I guess we kind of covered a lot of it. Cole Kmet. Obviously, maybe it's not obvious. Tyler Kmet or Hawkinson? Which one would you want?
Draft cost, I'm going Kmet.
Or okay, fine, not draft cost, but just you wanted to get a premium tight end. Who would you pay for?
Hawkins.
Who would you want?
I mean, if I'm picking who I think will finish higher at the end of the season and be a better player on your roster, I'm going Hawkinson.
What about you, Nate?
Same.
All right.
Higher.
Okay. In terms of Green Bay receivers, who's going to finish the highest in total fantasy points? Cobb, Watson, Watkins, or Dubs? Nate, let's go with you.
Oh, you didn't mention Lazard.
Yeah,
so
none of the above.
None of the yeah. Is this intended to leave Lazard out? You're saying
no, because I literally forgot to look one line higher than where I was looking previously. So yeah, I'll throw in Lazard in there too.
Yes, I will take Lazard.
Tyler,
I will take Lazard as well. Everyone else is a little old, little aged, or just plain bad or too young.
Fair enough. Speaking of young, let's talk about KJ Osborne. I think he's like a second-year or third-year player coming into the league this year. Are you drinking the Kool-Aid? If Adam Thielen goes down, he could slide into that wide receiver 2 role and produce, or is he kind of one of those has a good play every once in a while, but not somebody that you're really investing in any format, to be honest with you?
I will beer bong the Kool-Aid. Just throw it up there. I will drink it. No, I really like KJ Osborne. I'm trying to get him everywhere I can, at least in Dynasty. Redraft, I don't know if he's going to have an impact. He likely won't. But he could be to the Tyler Boyd level of be an actual wide receiver handcuff and have a wide receiver that is more likely to get injured in front of him than Tyler Boyd does. So I like Osborne as a stash on the back of your bench.
All right, let's finish off the show with going for the AFC North first, and then we'll do the NFC North, ranking teams 1 through 4. Let's start with the AFC North. Nate, who finishes first, second, third, and fourth?
It'll be Cincy, Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh.
All right, Tyler.
Man.
Oh, no. You got to stick with it.
That. Okay.
Tyler.
I'm going to go Baltimore, then Cincy, Pittsburgh, Cleveland.
I really want. Those first 11 games, I worry so much with Jacoby.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jorge.
And the Steelers are going to win 10 games somehow.
I know.
Yeah. I have to go with the revamped offensive line in Cincinnati, and I think that they're just going to take it this year. They were a play away from, or 2 plays away from winning the Super Bowl, and they got better. Then Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. Let's go with the NFC North. I'll start us off. I think it's – man, this is so hard. Give me Green Bay, Minnesota, and then I'm going to go Detroit and then Chicago. What about you, Tyler?
That exact order, and I don't think there's another outcome.
And Nate? Is Tyler right? Is Tyler wrong? Let's find out.
I have Minnesota ahead of Green Bay, and I think that it's going to be I think it's probably going to be like a tiebreaker type sort. I know that if I'm ranking people in this world, I have Doug number 1. Everybody else is a distant number 2. So
except for Autumn.
Good. Well, yeah, Autumn, but you get the pair.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
To be fair, I'll take Deborah over Doug and Autumn for those who.
That's
we're talking about Oklahoma Doug. Our friend is showing up on our live chat. If you haven't seen Doug or met Doug, awesome guy, great fantasy content, IDP producer. And then we had him on a pregame show once where he was giving his analysis, and all of a sudden his chicken on his farm, Deborah, literally got on top of the shed and started going buck wild, and he had to yell, "Deborah, get off the shed!" It was funny. I'm not doing the clip justice, but anywho, continue, please.
We lost Deb.
Oh,
R.I.P.
no!
Deborah. All right.
Well, that just brought the show to a screeching halt.
Yeah, so now who's your 101 dipshit?
Yeah. As if my COVID take on Kirk Cousins didn't bring things to a screeching halt. Losing Deborah, the chicken, definitely did. Well, with that, let's wrap the show up here. And, of course, let's plug everything that we're doing here. This Tyler and Nate have been alluding to. We were putting out basically encyclopedias of information on each division, on offense and in defense, and referring to IDP. We've done the AFC East, NFC East. We've done the NFC West, AFC West. We've done the NFC North. AFC North is coming out soon. And then before next Thursday, we're going to have both the AFC and NFC South. Literally tons of information, all the different writers, every single writer here at Fantasy and Frames, from over in the UK all the way to Arizona. I know that's kind of like a weird thing to say, but that's literally how far we're spanning, is providing content, giving you all the information you need to know in terms of breakdowns of each player's values to take at current ADP, according to Fantasy Pros ADP. And Nate, we have our rankings there for all these players. Nate is killing it with the IDP. Where Nate is in the Fantasy Pros Expert Consensus Ranking Competition this year. So getting some insight into how to approach your fantasy football drafts is super helpful with that, because the scoring setting in that Expert Consensus Ranking Competition is very common to what a lot of you who play IDP are the ones who that's the format that you kind of play in. So definitely information you want to be paying attention to with that. Tyler, you, of course, are the host of the Dynasty 365 podcast, which you can find going forward this season every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by us here at Fourth and Frames from 8 to 9. We got the Daily Fix podcast from 9 to 10 with Keith Fleming and Joe Matz. And then we're rounding it out from 10 to 11. I know, 10 to 11, but we're going strong. We're finishing with the best, wink, Nate, as you are rounding out us with Shoot the Gap, our IDP podcast. So a lot of great stuff going on here at Fantasy and Frames. Make sure to head over to fantasyandframes.com today and check out all of our article content. You can see all of us here. Nate, where they can find you on Twitter?
At Nate Markham, right there.
And Tyler?
If you're listening, you can't see it.
That is true.
And you can find me on Twitter at FF Tyler Heil. That's HEIL.
If you want some more awesomely spicy, controversial takes, you can find me at Jorge B. Edwards. Not really. That's like the only one I've ever done. I kind of talk about sci-fi and football and all sorts of geeky stuff. So follow me at Jorge B. Edwards for that, as well as follow us at Fantasy and Frames on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Keith Fleming has been doing a great job putting out all these TikToks for the different divisional breakdowns per position. Head over there, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. All the social media accounts. Come check us out there. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And everybody, this is holiday weekend, I think, coming up, right? Labor Day weekend? That's next week.
Yep.
Okay, well, don't worry about that. We'll talk about that next week.
Take the day off anyway. You heard it here at Fantasy and Frames. We'll send you a letter.
Your bosses would completely understand. So for Tyler, for Nate, I'm Jorge. You all have a great rest of your week.